Okay, let's get started. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So I am Chris Jones. I'm the co-founder and current CEO of Spectra Diversity. And this will not be a Spectra Diversity sales pitch. However, I do have data that I have because of my role here at Spectra. So I will be sharing some data. This webinar series follows the book, Powering Inclusive Cultures, and it might be helpful for you to have the book and follow along. We will be giving away 2 books at the end of our session today, so stay tuned for that. My guest today is Amy C. Waninger from Lead at Any Level. She's the founder and CEO of that company, where she improves employee engagement and retention for companies that promote from within. Amy offers assessments, that would be ours, advisory services and training on essential skills for inclusive leaders. As you can see there, 8 books. She is a keynote speaker in many, many places and has clients on all 7 continents. And yes, that includes Antarctica. Today, what we're going to cover is we're going to inform you about the effectiveness of having an inclusive culture. We're going to educate you a little bit on the data that supports inclusive leadership and motivate you towards different steps that leaders can take to be more inclusive. So, and this one slide is a repeat from last time, but we're getting so much bad news about DEI and what is actually happening. Well, this is a survey that was done by Littler, and this wasn't just a survey. This was these were interviews with these C-suite leaders, and this is what they said. You know, if you look at the bottom portion, 6% have decreased in some manner, and about 60% have increased in some manner. And that's not what we're seeing in the news, but this is what is actually happening according to the CEOs that were surveyed. Another survey by Ernst & Young said that 74% of employees responded that a company's prioritization of DEI factored into their choice of where they were going to work. So for those of you who may be discouraged, this is encouraging news. And this is another part of the encouraging news. This is data about inclusive organizations. This is from Deloitte. And look at the last one on the right. 8 times more likely to achieve better business outcomes. And you know, what organization wouldn't want to achieve better business outcomes? None that I'm aware of. And then here is, click. This is inclusive leaders. And according to the conference board, the 2023 C-Suite Outlook, CEO's top internal focus was to continue to attract and retain talent. CEOs see labor shortages as a major disruptor to their business operations. And here's the tie. Inclusive leaders create 76% decrease in employee attrition risk. These are all good numbers. Once again, something you can put in your tool bucket, your tool chest. This one is a guess. We're going to guess these. These are 5 fast facts about C-suite DEI. What percentage, and just type this into the chat box, what percentage of leaders agree that DEI is a top priority? Just put your best guess in there. Just type it in the chat box to everybody. 10%, 30%, 10, 23. Okay, this one is going to, oh, somebody did 70. Who did 70? Okay, because this is what it was. 95% of leaders agreed that DEI is a top priority, but only 34% believe that it's a strength in their workplace. So that's a lot of opportunity for those of us that are working in DEI with organizations. Okay, let's put, talk is cheap. Yes, Lord. In another survey, what percent of HR professionals viewed companies as going through the motions? So going through the motions, what percent are going through the motions? 95, 90, 99. Yeah, it is a lot. Not quite that many, but it is a lot. It's 80% of HR professionals. So in 2018, S&P included a diversity metric in their compensation program. By 2021, that had nearly doubled to 99 companies. Okay, let's do this one. Companies that disclose EEO reports outperformed their Russell 1000 peers in the stock market by what percent? 100%. 75, 30, 30, 62. Okay, this one, 2.4%. So 2.4%, if your stock went up 2.4%, you'd be okay with that. So this is kind of one of those medium numbers. But let's go to the bottom one. What percent of Americans want companies to publicize the ethnic and racial makeup of their organization? What percent of Americans want companies to publicize it? 45, 60, 75, 60. Yeah, it is. It's pretty high, and it is 73%. So this is something when you're tracking data, this, most Americans want their companies to publicize that. They want to not only for the companies that are the people that work in those companies, but the people that are considering those companies for their employment. So publicize the ethnic and racial makeup. And then what percent of CEOs see the lack of trust in their organization lies in their DEI practices? So this is what CEOs think of themselves: 30, 45, 23, 20, 50. And the answer is 41%. So not all of them, but 2/3 of them, is that? No, 1/3 of them see that, they see their organization properly. They see that the DEI is an issue in their organization. Thank you for playing that game. Okay. And part of that game, the C-suite demographics that you were looking at there, the C-suite is a reflection of unconscious bias. And we know that bias can lead to micro advantages. I like this one. This is a little quote from the book. 5.3% of large companies have a CEO named John. 4.5% have a CEO named David. And 4.1% have a CEO who is a woman. So we do have a ways to go. So micro advantages, there's a micro advantage of height. The average US American male is 5'9", and about 14.5% of all men are 6 feet or taller. Among CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, it's 58% compared to the 14%. Even more strikingly, in the general population, 3.9% of adult men are 6'2" or higher, but 30% of CEOs are 6'2" or higher. And what I always say when we're looking at the data is the data tells us the what, it doesn't necessarily tell us the why. But consider this, the average female is 5.4. So height could be a micro disadvantage for women. So
some change bubbles up, other change trickles down. Are your managers treating everyone fairly? The Spectra assessment measures management and how they are perceived organization-wide in terms of diversity and inclusion.
I love that little rolling ball. Okay, so this is part of our data. And what you see here, this is one of the, we've got 5 different management questions. They're not questions, they're statements. And this is one of them. Management holds all employees equally accountable for their actions and behaviors. And you see there's that light blue line, that's the reference group against which the other groups are compared. And the light orange represents a group which differs significantly from the reference group. So, and the way that this is determined, it's not just the average. If you're looking at simply the average in your data, you're going to be missing the mark, because it's not only in the average, it's how many people are in the average, and it's the spread of the numbers. So you can see that even though non-binary third gender scored a 2.7 on a scale of 1 to 5, it's not statistically significant because of the number of people. Same with the people that preferred not to answer. But the men and the women are different in how they perceive management on this statement. And this particular company, it was a, let's see, it's a banking company. And on 3 out of the 5 questions, their organization had a statistically significant difference between the way that the men and the women ranked that statement. Now, here's another one. This company is a global engineering firm. This is their first assessment, and they had a difference of 5. This is one of the, once again, one of the management statements, and none of their statements between the men and the women showed a statistical difference, but their disability people, it did show a statistical difference, even though there's just, there were just 5 of them. So, and once again, and this is something that we're going to tackle in another of our sessions. In this webinar series, we're going to talk about disabilities, and we're going to focus on mental disabilities for those of you who want to attend that one. And here's an overall, this is once again from our data, employees' perception of management. And in this one, I want to point out that research shows that the best way to remedy the effect of our bias is to immerse ourselves in opportunities to make positive connections with a diverse group of people. So, and those that do, those that have a 25% of diversity on their executive board had a return on equity, ROE, 53% higher than the other organizations. On this one, this is from our lifetime of data since we launched our assessment in 2017. And this is all organizations and all industries. And you can see that the men consistently are high, and Asian American men are even higher, although the numbers of them are smaller. The women are at 18.85. Black or African American employees were 17.58. And then non-binary third gender is down there at the bottom with 16.78. So this is how people rank management. There's another one of these for our culture and for policies, practices, and procedures. So as a lead-in to Amy's section of, what question is answered here? Oh, these are good question, Laurie. These are all 5 of the management questions grouped together. So there's 5 management questions. This is the grouping of the 5 and the split of the race and ethnicity and disability status, you know, all of the categories that we measure in our standard demographics. And now what I'd like to do And this is something that you do with your smartphone. So go on your smartphone and text a message text your message to, and you enter for the two, you enter the 22333, which I am doing now. Text that, and then for the text message, put Chris Jones 897. And then you get, and then it should, okay, then it says, poll, you've joined Chris Jones' session. When you're done, reply leave. So this is what I want to know. What are the challenges to being an inclusive leader? So what challenges are you seeing leadership struggle with? And let's see, I'm going to say, support, oh, lack training. Oh, do one word, then it comes out better. Yes. Investment. Understanding, knowledge, backing, time, investment. That's a dollars one. Backing, that's dollars and knowledge, acceptance. And hopefully, Amy, this will give you something to go on. Understanding, commitment, skill. Yeah, skill, you know, they don't know how to do it. Time, I would imagine time is something that all of them are lacking. I mean, there's a lot of demands on their time. Bias, yeah. Oh, politics. Yes. Okay, I'm going to, and I think I can save this. Save. I think I can save it. I don't know how to do that. Okay, I should have learned how to do that. Thank you so much. And Amy, hopefully this gives you something to build on. So, Amy, welcome.
Hello, this was such great information. And if I may, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to take this over from you.
Okay.
And Tammy, if we can get the second poll question up while I'm doing that, that would be wonderful. Thank you. I want to talk about today, we're going to talk about just a little bit, what is it that managers need to know? Because so many people get promoted into management because they are high potential employees. But then what we find is high potential employees don't always have all the skills they need to be inclusive leaders. And so I'm curious if we can get that poll up, please. Is it up there? I don't see it. There it is. So how does your organization support emerging and aspiring leaders? We know how important leaders are to attracting and retaining employees. We know how important leaders are in executing the D&I mission initiatives and promises of an organization, and how important it is for leaders to connect with folks across difference. And I'm curious, how is your organization supporting leaders right now? I'll give you just a minute to answer that question. So far, about half of you have responded, so please get your poll answers in. But I want to talk about very specifically, what are the skills that leaders need when they're taking on roles where they have to manage diverse teams effectively? Because a lot of times we take people who were technically good at their very technical roles, right, but not with the people skills to do the job effectively. And I know from firsthand experience, because I myself am a nerd, that reclusive, nerdy leaders don't always make, or reclusive, nerdy people don't always make inclusive leaders. So let's talk about what we can do about that. So it looks like from the poll questions, the vast majority are saying, hey, we just assume that our managers are going to figure it out eventually. I want you to think about what happens in the first week, the first month, the first year of being a new manager. And if we go back to the statistics that Chris shared about the importance of leadership, the importance of diversity and inclusion, and having cultures of belonging and psychological safety, all of that falls on leaders. Even when they're brand new, their first day on the job, people are looking to them to set the tone. And if half or more of our companies are not doing anything at all, except letting leaders figure this out, they're not just doing the leaders a disservice, but all the people on those leaders' teams. So we can close the poll. It looks like the answers have stopped coming in, but if you want to share those results, Tammy, it looks like about 7% of you say, hey, we're training people before they get promoted. And for those of you who are in that role, congratulations. Go thank your executive team for being proactive. I mean that. That is important, important work, and it doesn't happen very often. Those of you who are training managers within a year or two of being promoted, about 20%, think about all the damage a bad manager can do in those first couple months. And think about how you might accelerate that timeline just a little bit so you can get them trained earlier. Because the longer you let them kind of feel their way through it, the more damage they can do, the more people are going to leave. And then there's this last group, about 73% of you are either saying, well, we don't really do anything, or does LinkedIn Learning count? And I'm going to give you kind of a spoiler alert on this. LinkedIn Learning is not a training strategy. LinkedIn Learning is a great supplement to your training strategy, but it can't be the only thing. That's like saying they can go look on YouTube. Well, there's good stuff out there. There's not as good stuff out there. There's good stuff out there that's not aligned to our way of doing things in our organization. And there's good stuff out there that may or may not be aligned to the way we do things in our organization. The odds that two of your managers are going to take the same LinkedIn Learning course at the same time and get the same things out of it, and then connect and discuss how they can operationalize that in your environment are pretty close to zero. And so what happens is we have very fragmented culture. Leaders don't know what they're supposed to do. They try to piece things together the best they can, and it doesn't always work out in the best interest of the employees or the organization. So let me just show you the results real quick. And so you can see that the vast majority of folks don't have a strategy, or at least aren't executing a strategy well. And, in this time of labor crisis, when we're looking at people who have a lot of options about where they can work, the balance of power has shifted somewhat from employers to employees. We're starting to see more turnover. We're also seeing more people leaving the workforce because of retirement than we ever have before, and not enough people coming in to take their place. So I think a lot of the answers to why we're having problems in our cultures comes from this question. So let's talk about, what do we need to do as leaders, or what do we need to teach our leaders to help fix some of these problems that we have in our organizations. We know we're worried about attraction and retention. We know we're worried about turnover. We know we're worried about psychological safety. We know we're worried about not delivering on our D&I or employer brand promise. And this really all comes down to managers. Now, the good news is all of these skills can be taught. And I'm not talking about cultural competency yet. These are sort of basic skills that lead us to being able to learn cultural competency. So you can sort of think about, in your own environment, how are people getting these skills, if at all, by the time they become leaders? So the very first piece of this is managers need to understand why they can't wait to be inclusive leaders. What's the big picture? They need to understand deeply what the vision is for the organization and why the sustainability or the growth of the company depends on getting D&I right. And let's face it, it does, because our market is changing, right? So our consumer base is changing. It's more global. But even if you only sell products and services here in the US, you're looking at wildly different demographics than we had 50 years ago in the marketplace, or even 10 or 20 years ago in the marketplace. The same is true for our talent pools. Our talent pools are changing and the balance of power is shifting. So workers are getting younger, right? Because our workforce is aging and retiring. So workers are getting younger, but that younger workforce is the most diverse demographically we've ever had in our nation. And so managers need to understand not just that executives pay lip service to this, but why it's important and why it matters to the longevity, to the success, to the stock price, to the sustainability of the organization. Helping them understand that will go a long way toward getting them on board. And a lot of times we skip this step, right? We roll out unconscious bias training across the organization and we think we've done our job and wash our hands of it and assume people are going to figure out what to do with that. But it just doesn't happen that way. Managers really need to understand the big picture and then their role within that big picture. And I'm going to go back and make sure that I've got my chat open so that if there are questions, just pop them into the chat and I'll be happy to answer as we go. So the takeaway here is do a good job of explaining to people, not just the what, but the why and the what. Those two things are very important. And how is what I'm going to explain next. So if you think about, anybody who's ever gone to college, and I'm assuming that's at least a fair percentage of folks on this call, you didn't start out with advanced accounting or you didn't start out in calculus, right? There were some basic steps you took before that. You had to have some basic mathematical principles before you could take advanced math classes or advanced business math classes. And the same is true for inclusive leadership. There are some base skills we need so that we can become culturally competent. If we don't have those base skills, cultural competence training is going to go right over our heads. It's going to kind of skim off the surface, right? We can't internalize it because we don't understand the context for it. So the next piece that I think leaders really need to understand is when they're dealing with change, how do they not panic and actually find purpose and opportunity in the change? The reason this is so important is that DEI initiatives are change initiatives. They're change initiatives on top of other change initiatives, right? So think about the average manager in even a mid-sized organization. They're dealing with a new product rollout, a new service initiative, possibly a reorganization. They've got new members on their team. They might have somebody new in their management chain. They've got a new maybe HR system that's rolling out or open enrollment's happening. They're getting emails about that. The IT system is changing. So much about this is about needing to respond to change. But the change doesn't happen one at a time. It's all coming all at once. You can just put a yes or a quick emoji in the chat. If you remember, if any of you are old enough to have ever watched I Love Lucy, even on reruns, if you remember the episode of I Love Lucy where Lucy and Ethel get a job at the candy factory, tell me if you know this one. Emojis, hearts, reactions, however you want to do it. They get a job in a candy factory, and what happens? The candy comes along the line real slow, and they wrap up the candy, put it back on the conveyor belt, and it goes off screen. And the supervisor comes in and says, "How's it going? Looks good." And so she yells back to the people on the other side of the wall, "Ramp it up." And so she leaves, and so more chocolate starts coming through. And Lucy and Ethel are wrapping as fast as they can, and they're almost keeping up. Almost. And then the supervisor comes back in and she's like, "Let her rip, boys." And so then this candy's coming through at a breakneck pace. And Lucy and Ethel don't know what to do with it anymore. So they're shoving it down their dresses, they're putting it in their hats, they're eating it, throwing it behind them, throwing it on the floor, whatever they have to do so that they're not sending unwrapped candy down the conveyor belt. And every time I think about change in organizations, I think about that image of all the stuff coming down the conveyor belt and not near enough time, skill, or experience in how to wrap it up and manage it. And that's what your leaders are dealing with because they're getting change from every direction in your organization and at home all the time. So we need to help people not just manage a change, but manage change broadly so they understand how they can work through it, how they can sort of put together a process that helps them understand how to respond each and every time, something that's repeatable. And I think that's a piece that's missing from a lot of change management initiatives. Let me know in the chat if that resonates with you. A lot of times we're really good at managing a change, but we're not good at helping people broadly manage change generally, if that makes sense. The next piece is we need to help managers and really all of our employees build relationships across difference. Because a lot of times what we don't realize about our own networks is they are very insular and they are very homogeneous. Again, I'm going to show my age, but if there are any Seinfeld fans in the room, there's this whole episode of Seinfeld where Elaine, who is part of this friend group, finds another friend group that's sort of the mirror image of her existing friend group, right? And she starts hanging out with them and doing other things with them. And George, who's one of her original friends, says, well, I want to come with you to this. And she looks at him and she looks at the friend group where it's all mirror images of her existing friends. She goes, well, we already have a George. Basically telling him, like, we don't need you. You're superfluous. We've got one of you already. And I think if a lot of us were to look at our networks, really look at our networks, we would find that we got a whole lot of Georges and not a whole lot of everybody else. I actually wrote a book in 2018 called Network Beyond Bias. I'll hold it up if I'm allowed to do that, Chris. And in Network Beyond Bias, I actually show people how to assess their own networks and find out not just who's in them, but who's missing from their networks. And it's this ability to build relationships across difference that allow us to break down some of the us versus them walls that we have and see different people as us, right? People that we've never considered before. And so building those relationships makes a big difference in how we see the world, because now we're privy to other perspectives we didn't have before. The third piece of this, I am a huge, huge believer in strengths-based leadership. And often seeing our own strengths is one of the most difficult things we have to do, because what we do naturally comes so naturally for us, we can't see it. And then we have to kind of get outside of ourselves. And I use the Gallup Clifton Strengths Assessment for this to help people understand what their strengths are. It's not enough, though, for leaders to understand our own strengths. We have to understand the strengths of the people around us so we know how to leverage them most effectively, how to get the best from them, and how to communicate with them most effectively. And so teaching people to look for strengths rather than weaknesses, or as I had a manager that called them gaps, we were always trying to close the gaps or shore up weaknesses. And what that does is it makes people feel like they're defective, like there's something wrong with them. Well, think about it. We hire people by asking them, what do you uniquely bring to this organization or to this team? And we hire them for that thing that they bring that's unique. But then we manage them to all the other parts of their job that they told us in the beginning they probably weren't going to be very good at, right? If I hire somebody to do data analysis, I'm not allowed to punish them for not being a great public speaker, right? Because nobody can do everything. So we need to hire people and coach them and develop them in the places where they're naturally strong, and then surround them with people that can pick up the slack in different areas. And that's critical. And I see Debbie loves the assessment. Look for your superpowers and train for it. Absolutely. You're going to get the best return on your training investment, on your time, on your energy, where you're already strong. And then just find people around you to pick up the slack everywhere else. That's the strength of strength-based teams. Okay, so now we're getting into some other skills that might be a little bit touchier for people. A lot of managers are promoted without having real, tangible guidance on how to give and receive feedback effectively. Now, why is this important? Well, it's important for a couple of reasons. One, if I gave you 5 houseplants and said, keep them all alive, and you only watered one of the houseplants, and you only put one of the houseplants in the sunlight, and I came back and you said, well, I don't know what's wrong with the other 4. And I said, well, did you water them and give them sunlight? And you say no, we probably know what the problem is, right? The name of the assessment I was sharing, Chris, was the Clifton Strengths Assessment. It's from Gallup. It used to be called StrengthsFinder. So if we wouldn't expect houseplants to grow and thrive without giving them what they need to grow and thrive, why do we expect people on our teams to do it? What typically happens is if you've got a manager with 5 direct reports, those 5 direct reports are not getting the same level, amount, or quality of feedback as one another. And typically, the manager is going to give the best, most, and most frequent feedback, most actionable feedback to the person on the team that sits the closest to them and looks the most like them. That's just statistically true. So managers need to not only know how to give good, actionable feedback, they need to know how to hold themselves accountable to giving that feedback equitably. But they also need to understand how to receive feedback about little things like, in the meeting today, you interrupted me. Or, I prefer communication this way. Can you adjust your style when you communicate with me? Right? Those little bits of feedback start to build trust with employees when they respond, when managers respond. Practicing getting non-threatening feedback, even positive feedback, can go a long way toward building trust. But it can also help when managers need to hear something like, that joke you told the other day was really hurtful to people like me. And I'd appreciate if you didn't do that anymore. If the first time a manager has to deal with feedback from their team is something like that, they're going to get defensive. So we need to open managers up to more feedback more often. And finally, next, hiring. Hiring is such an important job. And so few leaders are trained in how to hire, and specifically how to take their bias out of the hiring process. I've had managers be very proudly tell me, that they use the beer test when they're hiring. And the beer test, for those of you who haven't heard this term, is I pick the person I'd want to have a beer with after work. Who do I like the best out of this candidate pool? Well, here's the problem. The job description isn't drinking buddy or best friend. And so you're not choosing the best person for the job if you're using the beer test. But managers don't know this because they've never been taught any better. A lot of them have never been taught. The other problem is a lot of times managers will pull people in from their teams to help with the hiring process who have had even less training than they have. So they don't know how to review resumes. They don't know how to put scoring systems in place. They don't know how to ask good interview questions. They don't know how to break ties. But they're being asked to do that. And they're being asked to do it usually by a manager who's just looking for somebody they want to have a beer with. Well, it's no wonder we end up with very homogeneous teams that are kind of in-group teams, right? That are exclusive, managers who don't deal well with difference. This is a self-perpetuating cycle. So we need to teach managers and their teams who are helping with the hiring process how to break out of this. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, we need to teach leaders how to develop a growth mindset and how to spread that growth mindset among their teams to create a learning culture. The reason this is so important is I want to take you back a while, right? Let's think back 20, 30 years before we were firmly entrenched in a knowledge economy, right? 20, 30 years ago in the workplace, being an expert at something meant that you knew everything about that thing. Some of you are old enough to remember this, right? The expert was the person who knew everything. Well, I got news for you. Information's free now. And the expert is no longer the person who knows everything because information is free and everybody can know everything. The expert does 2 things differently. They know how to filter the information for what's most important, and they know how to learn to find new information. So the expert is not the person who knows the most. It's the person who grows the most. And the only way we can teach people how to be culturally competent is if we can teach them about growth. Because if I believe that everything I knew 10 years ago is the absolute truth and can never change, I'm going to have a real hard time managing a team that comes from places I've never visited, that has life experiences I can't relate to, that has perspectives and needs and desires that don't make any sense to me. But if I can have a manager that knows that the expertise is the person who grows the most, they're going to be open to those different perspectives, open to understanding different narratives, open to finding out and getting curious about different people and different ways of being and doing. And so without that foundation of growth mindset, we don't have a chance of creating culturally competent leaders. But so many of our leaders are stuck in being experts in what they know, not in experts in how they can grow. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to ask, what questions do you have about these skills? And you can put those in the chat, or you can put them in the Q&A if you want to answer them, or if you want them anonymously. I'm also curious in the chat if you would let me know, are you training for these 7 things? Are you sharing with your managers right now today all 7 of these things? Why inclusive leadership matters in your organization, how they can respond to change more effectively, how they can build relationships across difference, how they can identify the strengths and play to the strengths of their teams and themselves. I'm missing one. Strengths. I missed one. I got to go back. Hold on. Giving and receiving feedback. Sorry, I had a brain freeze. Hiring beyond bias and creating a learning culture and developing a growth mindset. Are you training for all of those things today? If you could let me know that in the chat. And then I've got and Chris, I saw your question. I'll get to that here in a second about showing credits.
I have the example that I showed where there was the difference between the men and women in the organization. They have taken the assessment every year for 5 years. And they still have an issue with men and women, the difference between them and their approach to management. So I would guess that they're missing one or more of those components that you talked about, and it shows up in the data.
Absolutely. And my guess is it's 2 parts. There's probably a lot of bias at play, conscious or unconscious. I would bet that the feedback piece is a big component of that women are getting less feedback. We know women get a lot less feedback than their male counterparts. And I would also guess that there's a hiring and promotion bias, that this beer test is coming into play more often than not in their promotion and selection processes. So somebody says, I wish we could say we were. Well, not surprisingly, if you wish that you were training on this, I can help with that, and I'll tell you how to do that in just a second. Thank you for your candor, Valerie. I appreciate that. Chris, anything else to add before I move on? Because I've got a couple of offers for folks that I want to make sure that I get to.
I don't, nothing from me. Thank you.
Okay, sure thing. And please let me know in the chat if you have questions or comments, or, if I got anything, if you feel like I got anything wrong. But I really believe that these are the 7 foundational skills or knowledge areas that managers need if we're ever going to get to psychological safety, if we're ever going to get to inclusion, if we're ever going to get to cultural competence. These things have to be mastered first.
One thing that I would like to add to that, Amy, is that a lot of organizations, they focus on the D portion, and the D is like their big, that's where they put all their efforts. But I think, if you've got the I portion, if you've got the inclusion, the D will follow because the I is there. So I would focus more on the I than on the D.
Absolutely. And, a lot of times people say, well, we just don't have that much diversity in our organization. I'm like, well, how are you keeping the diversity you've got so you can build upon it? You can only do that with inclusion. People are not going to invite their friends and trusted coworkers and people they've known from past jobs into your organization if they themselves don't feel included and valued. And so many of our organizations rely on referrals to bring people in. And so we need to be very, very intentional about including the people who do show up today and tomorrow. All right. So I wrote another book. I've had a few. I wrote a book last year called Surviving the Labor Crisis. And this book includes everything that I discussed today, plus why you're not able to keep and attract people like you used to be able to, kind of the data behind where did all the people go, where did all the workers go, and also some of the hidden cost of turnover that we don't always recognize. And so if you'd like to get this book for free, it's available on Amazon. It's a small book. I think it's like 25 pages. You can buy it on Amazon, but I'm willing to give you the digital copy for free. You can either scan the QR code or you can go to this link. Let me put this in the chat, https talk.ac/Amy C. Waninger. And then you're going to use the code LABOR in all caps. But that gets you the free download of the book. And then if you are interested in doing this training in your organization, I offer a year-long series that has all 7 of these modules plus a eighth module, which is kind of a capstone and graduation for leaders that go through it. It's great for cohorts of leaders so that they can begin to operationalize what they learn and find the places in the organization that might need some shoring up or might need some process changes to help reinforce some of these lessons. I also want to offer to all of you SHRM credit for today's session. So if you are SHRM certified, either SHRM CP or SHRM SCP, you can use this recertification credit code 24-XETHM in your SHRM portal, and you will get 1 professional development credit for attending today. And so that's all from me, Chris. I'm going to pass the control back to you so you can take us home.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen and I'll share this one. So this is what we've got coming up. Amy, this was our 3rd chapter, our 3rd session. We have genders, sexual orientations, people of color, older, younger employees, disabilities, and veterans are our next 6 sessions. And Amy shared with me the secret to getting SHRM credits. So I'm gonna be doing that. But we have, for those of you who are still here, we have a giveaway, and Tammy, who are our 2 lucky winners that will get the Powering Inclusive Cultures autographed book.
We have Kara Martin and Kendall Dunn. They're on. If they can put their I'm here in the chat. Is it, we have to be present to win? Is that correct, Chris?
Present, must be present to win. Yep. Kendall Dunn, I'm here. Good. A
And then
book
Kara
is coming
Martin.
your way. And I'll send you an email, Kendall, and get your postal address. And who's the other one?
Kara Martin. Kara. I don't think Kara is on. So then our next one is Lauren Smith. Lauren is on.
Lauren.
Lauren Smith.
Going once, going twice. You're welcome, James. I'm glad
right.
you enjoyed it.
If Lauren's not with us, then how about Donna? Donna Berge? Berge?
Well, we did have 75 register and 27 show up. So go ahead. Who's the next one?
Elizabeth Lerando Hillman.
Yay!
Elizabeth.
So Elizabeth Hellman, I will send you an email and ask for your postal address. And the same with you. Boop, boop, boop. I have to go up.
Kendall.
There we go. Oh, congratulations. And Amy, do you want to put up your link again?
Yes, I can put the link to, give me one second. I got to go find it again.
To your bookage?
To my bookage. Hold on. Hold on. I'm having problems. Technical difficulties abound. Yes. So download my newest book at https. Where is it? It's going to ask you just a couple questions about my presentation, and then you will get the link to the book.
And I think you have to share your screen.
Oh, no, I put it in the chat.
Oh, you put it in the chat. Okay.
Yep.
Good. Well, thank you, everyone. This was supposed to be about 45 minutes. We're at 52, so we're a little over, but really good information. It's a heart.
I was saying sorry. I thought we had the full hour. So
No, that's okay. That's okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And I hope to see you at our next one. Do all genders feel respected and heard? With Rebecca Dess